Hi, everyone. I'm glad to present to you our first speaker, Kellina Powell, who will discuss rules and reminders for deaf people. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to teach you ladies about how to be inclusive for the deaf community. Why am I talking? There's so many miscommunication about the deaf community. There's a lot of lack of education on that. It all started when we go to school, right? When we go to school, teacher teach us how to be inclusive. What can we do? But there's not that much inclusive about the deaf community. Not everybody are able to do anything like the deaf people can do. For example, ASL. They don't teach ASL or BSL in school, right? And this is where the problem comes in where we're trying to communicate with someone who's deaf like myself. I'm actually a deaf person too. I've been deaf since I was 4, so a lot of story happened when I was 4. My life was a roller coaster since then, but it doesn't stop me to be who I am today. Also too, this is super important because now COVID, right? COVID really hit a lot of people, especially on social media, the mask, and our mental health status and stuff. I wanted to, my goal is to teach everybody on that Zoom is to reach their goals and allow the community to feel like they are included and that they belong into the hearing community as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to make your social media a healthy and productive environment. Let's keep these in mind. For social media reminder, it's one, have the closed caption. Do not summarize your caption in a summary box. I see that a lot of times with a lot of people, and I always have to continually remind people, influencers, don't do that. Because if they do that, you're gonna lose your content, you're gonna lose your community, especially someone who's not just deaf, but also people who speak a different language or someone who have brain injury or anything like that. Because closed caption is really, really helpful for those who, not just who is deaf, but also in general. And also, another tip I actually wanted to talk about is certain words are appropriate to use, but certain words are not appropriate. For example, a lot of people keep saying hearing impaired. I have to consistently repeat to people saying hearing impaired is not appropriate to use. So basically, the reason for that is because hearing impaired is basically saying deaf and dumb. That's kind of short that. So the appropriate word to use for someone who is deaf, either say deaf or hard of hearing. Um, Another thing too, I noticed a lot of times it happens to me all the time. People always send voice notes in my DM, and I said, no, you know I'm deaf. Why are you sending me a voice note? I can't hear that all the time. And also too, I want people to make sure that be careful of your volumes in terms of when you're speaking to someone, especially when you're on Rail, IGTV, or any of the video platform, especially on TikTok too. I know it's a lot of time on TikTok. Um, a lot of people tend to talk louder than they should be talking, especially on TikTok. And so yeah, and be prepared for client or customer. And we wanted to also talk about business. I know a lot of us women here are business entrepreneurs, people as well. So I want the thing to keep in mind. One, don't be afraid to ask what their needs are, especially if you're approaching someone who is deaf like myself. The reason for that is because I know people be like, oh, but Kalina, it's kind of awkward. It's not awkward. Trust me, it's not awkward. You want to make sure that you represent yourself well and that you actually are willing to able to accept someone's needs. Because that's super important. If for example, if you ask me what my needs are, I would definitely would recommend you someone else. Be like, yeah, this person actually really cared. She even made the effort to ask. So that's why it's very important to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. And also to always find out if the tool you're using to meet the person has closed caption, for example, Zoom, Google Meet, or WebEx. I know Zoom right now, they're developing closed caption automatic, but I think you have to upgrade it now in order to get closed caption. Google Meet is automatic. You just click on closed caption on the left hand side at the bottom bar. And WebEx, same thing, it's at the bottom. I think it's on the right hand side, I'm pretty sure, and just click on it and it's boom, it's automatic for you. You don't have to do anything, you do not need to type. And also too, always face your client, your customer, especially when you're speaking to them, it's very important. So that way we can read your lips. A lot of deaf people like myself are heavy lip reader. We rely heavy on lips. And like I said at the bottom, bonus. Deaf people read lips. Don't hide your lip or cover your video because it's really important for us to read your lips. And see you. Event, masterclass, and other games. Make sure your closed captions are on at all costs. Especially, I know now that COVID's slowing down, everything's opening up, especially big events. It's very important to make sure that your speaker is not continually having engaging conversation with the audience, because we that people get confused sometimes when we're kind of keep up with the conversation. So try and have a lot engaging with the audience, not too much. I'm not telling you don't do it, but it's up to you and how you want it to run it. And same thing with masterclass. Like I know people do live masterclass and people tend to go up and down, but try your best not to do too much with that, because like myself, I've been in a lot of masterclass and I get a lot of people asking for feedback to help them get better at trying to be more inclusive. So I highly encourage a lot of people to try not to get too much. And make sure you know your communication skills are super on point, 100%. And bonus, understand that deaf people listen within their eyes. A lot of people did not know that. So because, like I mentioned, closed captions super important, because that way we can follow along. And yeah, and also too, very important to keep your microphone on mute and don't be, oh, sorry. Yeah, just make sure your microphone's on mute, because my background noises or anything like that, it will help you reduce the distraction, especially background noise and any other people on there. And if your audience want to speak, make sure you tell them do not unmute themselves. It's just the number one thing a lot of people really don't do a lot of time. But I highly recommend a lot of you guys do that. Okay. And it's not easy. It's not easy to be inclusive for the deaf people, because it can be really hard. I will tell you the truth, like myself, sometimes I have to make a contact and sometimes I'm like, oh shit, I have to do a closed caption. Oh my God, am I gonna have enough time? Oh my God, okay, this is taking too long. Okay, should I make my video shorter? No. Make your video as long as you can. If you need help, just let me know. I have a crazy shortcut ever for closed caption. A lot of people are like, really? Oh yeah, just hit my DM or look at my website. I would definitely help you with that. Not a problem. Something super fast and quick, believe me. And other reminders, don't be afraid to ask questions, like I mentioned. Be curious and be polite. The reason why that I say that is because the deaf people are very sensitive. Our community is very sensitive. So make sure to be careful how you use your words. It's very important to understand how to communicate. That's number one. Two, what words to use. Like for example, don't use hand and peer to describe the deaf community. To try not to do that. And Clubhouse. I don't know if a lot of us are actually on Clubhouse, but Clubhouse is an audio app. A lot of people don't know that there actually are deaf people on the app, like myself. The way to be inclusive for Clubhouse is say this is Kellina speaking before you speak, and then when you're done speaking, say I'm done speaking. So that way we can follow the conversation, and that way we know what is really going on in the room, especially for those who are using closed caption on the phone. Because I know people who actually on Clubhouse actually use Google Meet to keep up with the conversation or their cell phone. And be their friend. Don't be afraid to reach out to them and ask them questions like, hey, how can we do this? How can we be friends? I know a lot of people be like, oh my God, how do we be friends with this person? I don't know. Like, don't be afraid. Don't overthink too much about it. That's why I realize with a lot of people, they overthink too much. I'm like, relax, just take a deep breath. You have fun with the person. And who knows, maybe that person turns out to be a business person. You never know. And lastly, support each other. Encourage each other, tell each other about different business, uplift each other, and that's what's something very important. And yes, and I'm done speaking for today. And if you like more information, you want to contact me in terms of how to be more inclusive for the deaf community, you can always email me at deafqueenboss@gmail.com or my Instagram, deafqueenboss, or my website, queenempowerment.com. And yes, and I'm done.
So I'm excited to announce our next speaker, Veronica Schmidt.
Hi everyone, and thank you very much, Zoe, for having me here. Now, I wanted to come talk to you guys about the 5 philosophies of application logs. But before we start, who am I and why is logging so important to me? Well, I'm currently in an academic position because I wanted to do more research and I wanted to teach and pass on what I've learned for the last 12 years. I'm also a director of my own company in South Africa, the FIR Lab, specifically incident response. And then I'm working as a research and security engineer for a medical device manufacturer, and I'm a cyborg. Pull me aside after the talk and ask me why that is. I'm also a goon for DEFCON that's currently on, as well as I refer to myself as a hacker, builder, protector, and forensicator. Now, I wanted to start by my journey and why application logs are important. Now, I am the one that is obsessed or called in to deal with your logs. I am the incident responder that when you've suffered a breach, I get the phone call at 12 at night, and I'm expected to be the magician to make things appear in logs that don't exist. This kind of hits. It's always when I deal with an incident, I would say to my colleagues, I wish I had better logging around a specific component, or I am lacking specific logs in an application that was breached. And I said to them the one day, I said, if we don't have it, why aren't we working with developers to build in forensic readiness and incident response capabilities in their application logs? Now, this was a very daunting and scary task for me because I am not a developer. I am not someone that builds software, but I am someone that spends a significant amount of time at the end of an incident scope trying to figure out what has happened, why it's happened, and what we can do to fix it. Now, my research started to learn more about the application development world, and I kind of stumbled upon two books that changed my life. Two books that let me understand that there is this great divide within application security and application operations in organizations between development and ops. These teams are often at loggerheads and often speak very different languages. Now, the Unicorn Project and the Phoenix Project is two books that frame the disruptions that developers face when operations don't work so well, as well as from the operation perspective. It's really a good book that Jean Kim has written, and this book covers specifically 5 philosophies for having a happy developer or being a better developer. Now, philosophy 1 starts with locality and simplicity. So again, it's everything should be accessible for the developer, and we should keep our processes simple. Often we see organizations that have overcomplicated the onboarding process. Developers are having to set up their own environments, and it just starts off on the wrong foot. Now, philosophy 2 is focus, flow, and joy. Often I hear a happy developer is a productive developer. The third philosophy is that improvement of daily work. So you need to enjoy what you do. And this is one of the things that I learned very early on, is that you spend 8 to 12 hours a day doing your job. You should love what you do, because that is what you're going to be spending the majority of your life on. Now, philosophy 4 is psychological safety. Now, as an incident responder, often once the breach has appeared, taken place, and we've done root cause analysis, we've mitigated and recovered, we would do a lessons learned. Now, one of the rules from a lessons learned from a security perspective or an incident response perspective is we do not point fingers. There's no blame assigned. We all will look back at the incident and learn from it. After all, it's called lessons learned. Now, often when a breach has taken place on an application or it's due to some weak code, developers might not feel like they can come forward, that they can learn from the process. Developers need psychological safety to make mistakes, to learn from their mistakes. Now, philosophy 5 is customer focus. After all, the purpose of software development is to get a product to market. It's to supply the customer with something that they can use. So I started thinking in terms of these 5 philosophies. Now, how can I apply this to developing logs? Logs are often not thought of as a feature to a product. It is thought of as a byproduct of the code. So the code produces the events. And then later on, security would say, but we need to be able to see authorization, we need to see session management and things like that. I started on a crusade after I realized that I don't have the application logs I need to successfully do early detection of breaches, as well as actually deal with what has occurred. So I came up with my own 5 logging philosophies. Now, these are not the Bible of log development or the thing that's going to keep you safe, but it's to put you on your journey to actually deal with feature development for logs. So how do you think about your logs right at the beginning of your pipeline versus at the end when an incident has taken place? Philosophy 1 is keep it simple, keep it clean and detailed enough. Often what I see happen is that the logs are so overly verbose or so complex that you are unable to follow the workflow. From an incident response perspective and a development perspective, we want to see that the workflow has successfully concluded itself. We want to be able to follow what has happened. Now, incident response is not something that just security does. Developers from their point of view do field investigations and debugging. Now, that is also incident response. Then you have red teamers that are also going to look at your logs from a different perspective to find what they can actually use against you to break in. And then you have the forensicators, the incident responders. We want to know the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. Now, it's important to make sure that you just give enough information in your events that you can still debug, but do so safely. Philosophy 2 is keep it tagged, create your metadata and use it. And this is kind of where privacy by design comes in for me, because we need to be aware of the data that our application is producing. Part of the OWASP top 10 is sensitive data disclosure, and a lot of the sensitive data is often found in an application's log. If you know that you have data values that are perhaps PHI, PII, confidential, or secret, use the power within your code to tag those with appropriate privacy levels and build the controls into your logs to not print them, hash them, or just redact them from your logs automatically. Also, refrain from doing print bodies. Often that is the fast and easy way to get information into your logs, but it's often where you disclose your app keys and secrets, your JWT tokens, or just some bad information you don't want to send out there. Now, philosophy 3 is probably my favorite one. It's keep it clean and keep it focused. This philosophy discusses logging depth. It discusses the concept of, as our applications grow and we have different sprints and new updates coming out and maintenance releases, the code grows. If the code grows, so does your logging. Ensure that you deal with items much like technical debt that grows with your application. And again, keep it workflow focused. Now, philosophy 5, consider who has access to your logs, how they are stored and how they are transported. Often application logs are stored in text or in a zip folder, or they are not dealt with appropriate encryption. Remember, often these applications reside on a mobile phone, on someone else's machine, or a server that you don't control. Consider the boundaries that the data, especially your log file, travels through to come back to your SOC or your scene. Another thing that I've realized is we don't check log integrity. We receive the file, we ensure that we've received it from the appropriate sources, but we don't validate the contents of the log. Now, in all these types of incident response, all roads lead to the logs, both for developers and forensicators and security folks. Your logs are one of the most important things that your code produces. Now, I, whilst doing research, stumbled upon Uncle Bob. And where he states, be kind to your future self for when you need to go back to reading your code. I take it a step further and say, be kind to your future forensicator. We come in very long after the fact, and we have to reconstruct events based upon what your logs are. Now, on average, to detect a breach that has occurred is 280 days. That's very long for us to find out that something's happened. If we build in detection capabilities or methods to tell when there is a security breach, we are able to detect these faster. Now, 80% of the breaches that have occurred in 2020 contained PHI passwords and secrets, and a whole lot of those were in the application level logs. It's important also to differentiate between what is a debug log and what is a production log, and what the difference in information is that goes into these kind of logs. Now, I wondered how I would fix the problem or the conundrum that I had about getting better application logs. And I soon realized that all roads lead to green. There is approximately 26.6 million developers in the world. Now, if you compare that with approximately the 4 million in cybersecurity, it is very obvious that the solution to the logging problem or even application security does not lie in the hands of blue and red. It lies in the hands of green. It lies in the hands of the people that create the code. So how do we better enable developers to build in forensic readiness and understand incident response? Well, it's easy. Well, perhaps easier than it sounds. We help them to think like attackers. Green builds and red attacks. Red only needs to win once. But who are your best pen testers? Your best pen testers in your organization is your developers. They build the code, they will know how to break the code. So helping developers to understand that they need to think like an attacker will influence the way that they build their code. By understanding how their code can be attacked, they will understand how they need to build in security controls to prevent or detect that this has happened. But we need to take it one step further. They need to bring it full circle and understand how to investigate it, which is something they do just from a different perspective. We need the information to be able to do a root cause analysis. Now, I have an OWASP project that is called Secure Logging Benchmark, and I need more forensic coding ninjas. I need more hands, I need more brains, I need more people to help come to the conversation and help us figure out how we can guide developers to build better logs. Now, in short, if you take anything away from this talk, is your logs should be simple, they should be structured. Inevitably, if they're going to be passed into a SIEM, please structure your logs. They should contain enough information without disclosing any sensitive, confidential, or private information. Remember, often accidental information disclosure is within the logs. This can lead to future breaches. Thank you very much for having me today. And if you are suffering from log paralysis or struggling to figure out how you need to make logging part of your features for your application, please reach out and contact me.
Hello. The next speaker I'm proud to present is Lesley Nuttall.
Oh, thank you. So as Zoe said, my name is Lesley Nuttall, and I work in cybersecurity at IBM Cloud and have a background in troubleshooting, but I'm actually here today to discuss an IBM initiative that's focused on determining how we can make technology resistant to being used as a weapon in abusive relationships. On that note, I just want to give a quick content warning. While there are no graphic descriptions of violence, I will be discussing aspects of domestic abuse which some people may find upsetting. Before I begin, I'll just say a few words on innovation. There is, and has been for some time, a lot of focus on accelerating scientific and technological discovery. And sometimes we are so focused on the amazing achievements of our innovation that at first we may not notice the downside of that invention. Sciences and technologies are neither inherently good nor inherently bad, but they can lead to good and bad outcomes, your utopias and dystopias. At its best, technology supports initiatives of all kinds, benefiting individuals, society, and even the planet. At its worst, there are unanticipated consequences, accidents, or even malevolent uses. While we absolutely should be excited and hopeful about the potential of new technologies, my talk today is about tempering any optimism bias by recognizing that technology can be and is being manipulated for harm. Technology has revolutionized our world, making our lives easier, safer, faster, and more connected. It allows us to video chat with a loved one halfway around the world, instantly make purchases for everything from groceries to houses, and remotely control home devices to ensure comfort and security. But imagine being terrified of that technology, being fearful to leave the home, afraid to connect with friends, and scared that if you do not follow every single rule, the all-seeing devices in your home will know, and so will your abuser. This isn't some fictional dystopian tale, but instead a daily reality for a multitude of domestic abuse victims. It's a sad fact that domestic abuse is a pervasive problem in society, and anyone of any gender, age, race, or religion can be a victim or a perpetrator. And reports have shown that this form of abuse has surged during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the United Kingdom alone, there was one domestic abuse call made to police forces every 30 seconds in the first 7 weeks of quarantine. Similarly, technology-facilitated abuse appears to have become more prevalent during the pandemic as abusers exploit the climate of seclusion and increased reliance on technology for social connections. To help tackle this issue, IBM published our 5 design principles to combat domestic abuse, which, gosh, we hope will be the first step towards inherently safer technology. The idea for these principles came about after some colleagues were openly laughing and discussing about how they were remotely controlling the heating and Wi-Fi at home, unbeknownst to their partners who were at home at the time. Now, this was all said in a very jovial manner as a practical joke, and it's very possible that their partners also found it funny. But it got us wondering if and how everyday technology could be used in a more sinister setting. So a team of IBM volunteers set up an initiative to investigate. After some initial research, it soon became clear that this kind of manipulation of technology is prevalent in domestic abuse, particularly coercive control, where relentless patterns of coercive and controlling behavior create such fear of another person that the victim will do anything the abuser requires. There is help and guidance available to people who are facing this kind of abuse, but the bulk of it focuses on keeping safe by educating yourself in the technology. In addition, advice could sometimes further isolate victims, and apps built to help could place them in increased danger if discovered by the perpetrator. We believe that the burden of safety shouldn't fall solely on the shoulders of the end user, and that is why we felt it was important that at least some of the onus be shifted onto thoughtful design. And thus we developed a set of guidelines that helps technologists think about building their products from the ground up to be resistant to abuse. So how is technology being used to abuse? Meet Tina, a stay-at-home mum with 2 children who was recently split up from her partner. This morning, when she came down for breakfast, her smart speakers started playing threatening, expletive-filled tirades. This has happened before and is starting to really upset Tina. Her ex-partner set them up, and Tina can't work out how to remove his control. She thinks she'll probably have to throw the speakers away. After taking the children to school, Tina heads to a new cafe she found online. While waiting for her friend, Tina's ex-partner turns up unexpectedly and causes an awful scene. She has no idea how he found her, but he's been monitoring Tina's search history via her cloud accounts and tracking her location with the car app. The friend she was meant to meet never turns up. And when Tina calls, her friend says that she received a message from Tina the night before on social media, cancelling the date. Tina's ex still has access to her account on his phone and deleted the message after sending it, so Tina couldn't see it in her history. To top it off, Tina then receives a notification from her banking app with details of a new incoming transaction. She discovers that her ex-partner has transferred a few pennies to her account with a vile message in the transaction description. Tina goes home feeling isolated, scared, and depressed. How is her ex-partner still controlling her even after she made him leave? Tina is a victim of technology-facilitated abuse, and she is not alone. An Australian survey of domestic violence support workers found an almost complete overlap between technology abuse and domestic abuse, with over 99% saying they had clients who had experienced technology-facilitated abuse. The victims feel like they're under constant surveillance. They feel vulnerable, powerless, and they feel like nowhere is safe. At this point, you may be wondering, how big of a problem is this? Are we talking about a niche issue? Whilst there is no central reporting for technology-facilitated abuse, the number of cases appears to be on the rise. You may have seen the various news articles talking about survivors' experiences, many of which are quite disturbing. In fact, a UK news investigation looking into technology abuse found an 1,800% increase in alleged cyberstalking offences between 2014 and 18. Research in Australia found that between 2015 and 2020, there was a 245% increase in reports of GPS tracking of domestic abuse victims and survivors, and a 183% rise in the use of video cameras. Refuge, who are the UK's largest provider of shelters for domestic abuse victims, who also run the National Helpline, found that nearly 3/4 of the people seeking their help in 2019 had faced abuse via technology. They also saw a rise in abusers using IoT devices against their victims, such as smart locks, webcams, and smart heating systems. More recently, during lockdown, antivirus company Malwarebytes reported a 780% increase in the detection of monitoring apps and a 1,677% increase in detections of spyware. Considering all this, I think we are safe to say that technology-facilitated abuse, it's a significant issue. It's been estimated that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men have experienced an abusive relationship. But what is deeply worrying is the impact on children. 1 in 7 children and young people under the age of 18 will have lived with domestic violence at some point in their childhood. And a recent study commissioned by eSafety on Australia found that 27% of domestic abuse cases involve technology-facilitated abuse of children. The perpetrators, they typically use everyday technologies to cause harm, with the most common categories of abuse being monitoring and stalking, threats and intimidation, as well as blocking communications. There were stories of abusers using their children's devices, social media accounts, and even online schooling platforms to seek information on their family's whereabouts for the purposes of control. In one case, a man pretended to be his son's friend on a computer game, manipulating his son in an attempt to determine the boy's mother's location so that he could physically assault her. The children feel a sense of being continuously watched, guilt for inadvertently disclosing information, and fear for the consequences. Professionals reported this contributed to harmful impacts on the mental health of over 2/3 of the children, with serious impacts being school absenteeism, social isolation, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. Unfortunately, there is no easy answer to ending technology-facilitated abuse. However, we can help by balancing the intended with the unintended consequences of our tech. And the 5 design principles will guide technologists in this endeavor. The first principle is promoting diversity, having a diverse design team who consider all potential users of the technology, allowing greater exploration of both positive and negative use cases. Second is guaranteeing privacy and choice by enabling users to make active, informed decisions about their privacy settings with simple and clear configuration where the default settings are carefully considered. The third principle is combating gaslighting by having a digital record of who did what when, so as to disrupt attempts at psychological manipulation. Fourth is strengthening security and data so that tech only collects and shares necessary data where users of shared technology have joint control. And the final principle is making technology more intuitive so that users can navigate and understand it with ease, thus reducing the risk of abusers dominating with their greater technical confidence. To bring context to these principles, I'll now explore some scenarios with you. While the examples themselves, they're fictional, they do draw on our research to ensure that they are realistic. This is Stacey. Her mum, Mary, has escaped an abusive husband, Dave, to a refuge with Stacey and her younger brother, Toby. When Stacey's dad messages her asking for a photo of her homework, Stacey doesn't think anything of it and sent it to her dad. Stacey doesn't realize the photo has location data embedded in it. Dave uses this to find the refuge and waits outside to threaten Mary. Terrified, Mary has to scramble to find somewhere new that she can safely stay with her children. The creators of the photo sharing app used personas to discover use cases, but the personas didn't include children. So the team didn't come to realize that children would not understand the terminology used in their privacy conditions. This led to Stacey sharing her location data unknowingly, which is then used by Dave with harmful consequences. Technology design is critical to solving challenges at the product and experience level, yet our devices and apps tend to reflect the people who create them. Therefore, we need to ensure that the rich variance in humanity is reflected in our design teams. Having a diverse range of voices being heard throughout the design and development process would not only enable a more complete set of requirements and use cases be identified, but also help to determine potential issues from an individual, societal, and ethical perspective. For the app that Stacey used, as well as including children as potential users of the application, the developers could have included abusive personas to explore ways that their product might be manipulated for harm. Alex here is setting his social media privacy settings. The choices are a big green accept default button and a smaller red advanced settings button. Alex chooses the accept default option as it's easier and less intimidating. Later that day, he accepts a friend request from a female acquaintance and, based on his default settings, this is unknowingly posted to his profile page. Alex's abusive wife sees this update and decides to punish him. In this example, Alex was guided to accept the default as the custom privacy settings were less appealing. However, he did not fully understand the consequences of that choice. If he had known that the default option would automatically post all activities to his page, he might have made a different decision. The technology we use needs to be transparent and proactively inform us about what data is shared and recorded, so that we can make decisions that are right and safe for us. In addition, the most appropriate privacy settings might differ across the user base or change with time. So rather than having just one set of default settings, it might be worth exploring different approaches, as well as give users the ability to make discrete changes to their settings. This is Rob. Now, he's at home a lot at the moment while his partner Angus goes to work. Strange things have been happening over the last few weeks. Lights randomly turning off when he's trying to read, the stereo blasting out loud music when he's on a call, and the temperature alternating between stifling heat and frigid cold. This is a continuous pattern, and Rob feels like he's losing control of his home. Yet, when he tries to discuss it with his partner, Angus dismisses his worries, responding with, "You're overreacting," and "Gosh, that's never happened to me. You must be imagining it." The reality is that Angus is controlling the home remotely, and with no clear indication on the devices as to what changes have been made, Rob is literally left in the dark. Gaslighting is where a person manipulates someone psychologically into doubting their memories and judgment. Technology can play a key part in this, especially when it can be controlled by more than one user or accessed remotely. If the devices in our homes had obvious alerts when they are remotely activated and had an audit trail of who did what when, this would make it difficult for abusers to obscure and distort the truth. Furthermore, having a manual override on the devices would return some of the power to the local user. This here is Lynn. She was initially quite reluctant to share her email password with Roger, but he insisted, saying it was important to have trust when you're in a relationship. Now Roger can access many of the apps that Lynn uses that are linked to that email account. For example, Lynn does not know that her navigation app is saving a history of everywhere she goes. This is linked to her email account, so Roger now has access to this too. The dynamic in personal relationships is different to the standard one user, one account scenario. Accounts and passwords are often shared, or devices in the home have multiple users, yet they only have one admin account. With the increase in the use of federated accounts to enable users to utilize multiple online services using a single user ID, abusers could have access to data from multiple sources with just one set of credentials. If Lynn's apps had encouraged her to enable two-factor authentication, Roger would have an additional barrier. It would be harder to access all of the services linked to Lynn's account without her knowing, even though he has her password. However, even here we face challenges. Some devices have their Notification settings default to show content on the lock screen. So if Lynn had not changed her phone's default settings, a one-time password would be shown on her lock screen, which Roger could see without the need to log in. One final area to mention here is data, being aware that it can have different sensitivities and making sure you consider how it could be manipulated in the wrong hands. Take the example of device battery levels, which is often included when you share your location. This seems like a really minor, innocuous piece of data, and you might wonder what harm there is in sharing it. But with that one small piece of information in the hands of an abuser, their victims can no longer escape the relentless barrage of abusive messages by turning off their phone and saying their battery had died, because the perpetrator will know they'd lied, potentially leading to harmful consequences. So Olivia here is on maternity leave, spending an awful lot of time at home caring for her newborn son. Her controlling father has recently installed a connected doorbell. Olivia doesn't know how the doorbell works. She isn't sure if it's recording all the time, so she's nervous about leaving the house or having her friends come to visit without her father's permission. The doorbell requires an application be installed on a device. If it is complicated to set up and use, or even if it is perceived to be so, it could be a barrier to Olivia controlling her own environment. For those without a confident grasp of a given piece of technology, it's easy to fear its potential in the hands of someone else. Making technology intuitive to use and understand is key. Even minor changes such as wording could make a difference, meaning a less confident user is more likely to access functionality that aids them. However, it's worth noting that intuitive does not necessarily mean obvious. User experience design is a complex task, so it's important to not only have a diverse design team, as we discussed in the first principle, but also that thorough usability testing has been carried out to a range of users, as what may seem intuitive to one may not be intuitive to all. So to recap, the 5 design principles are promoting diversity, guaranteeing privacy and choice, combating gaslighting, strengthening security and data, and making technology more intuitive. Some may be more related to user interfaces, some are focused on server-side functionality, while still others are concerned with cybersecurity methods. But at the end of the day, any technology that interacts with humans, uses their data, or influences decisions about and for them could potentially be manipulated by bad actors. That is why we ask that anyone developing new technology adopt these principles, open up conversations, and start asking the questions as to whether their tech could be used to cause harm. In addition to the morality behind designing products in this way, such an approach will also have wider benefits. It's been seen before that creating technology to be more inclusive can have a positive impact on the whole. By thinking about technology-facilitated abuse and designing products to resist it, we should be able to enhance the usability, security, and privacy of new technologies for all. Gosh, domestic abuse is a scourge on our families and communities, with technology enabling this hidden crime. While the control that abusers exert isn't new, the tools that they use are. Few in the technical community intentionally create technology to cause harm, but it is possible that there is a disconnect from the unintended effects of those creations. By finding ways of designing technology to thwart attempts at manipulating it for abuse right from the get-go, we should be able to produce products that improve the lives of some of society's most vulnerable people. Compassion should be our foundation always. And in today's world, this is more important than ever. So finally, I thought I'd share some of our future plans with you. So currently, the team are working towards operationalizing the 5 principles. Through our conversations with designers and developers, it's become clear that while many agree that something needs to be done about this issue, it isn't always obvious how to apply coercive control resistant design to their work. So we're looking at creating a CCRD threat modeling toolkit, recognizing that perpetrators can and will manipulate technology for harm and modeling those threats. We feel that traditional threat modeling can sometimes be somewhat inwards facing, often focusing on protecting internal assets, services, and data, etc. But by putting an abuser hat on, focusing on intent and thinking of harm to individuals, we can start to look outwards and think of the ways a given piece of technology might be leveraged for abuse. We can then utilize that insight into this new threat landscape to design our tech to be resistant to malicious manipulation. Our second longer term goal is to create a technology standard to address technology facilitated abuse. Now, to stand any chance of succeeding, it's paramount that we have diversity of thought. So we're working with the IEEE, who are an international standards organization, to bring together a working group. We are keen that this group has wide representation, including from the technology sector, but also from industry, government, academia, and the non-profit sector. So if anyone is interested in volunteering to participate in this working group, I'd be happy to share more details. And this is where I normally ask if people would have any questions.